Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. So let's jump right into things. Today, we're unpacking a psychological paradox that is incredibly complex, totally fascinating, and honestly, deeply misunderstood by most people. We're talking about a scenario that plays out behind closed doors everywhere, and it leaves outsiders just completely baffled. The question is, why do people stay in relationships that clearly cause them pain? I mean, it totally defies our basic human instinct for self-preservation, right? Well, today we're going to break down the actual mechanisms of emotional control and decode exactly how the human mind can be systematically trapped.
So we really have to start with this fundamental question. Why is it so hard to leave a relationship that hurts us? Look, if you've never been in this situation, it seems like simple math. If it hurts, you leave. Easy. But for the people actually stuck inside these dynamics, leaving feels as impossible as, say, trying to breathe underwater. And the sad part is, because society really doesn't understand the hidden mechanics at play here, we end up unfairly pointing the finger at the victim. We ask things like, well, why didn't you just walk out the door?
I want to just go ahead and smash that myth right now. It is absolutely not about weakness. It's about complex psychological mechanisms. Staying in a painful, controlling relationship, that has literally nothing to do with a lack of willpower or intelligence or strength. As we're going to see, the folks caught in these webs are actually dealing with a highly sophisticated form of psychological entrapment. It's a cage that literally paralyzes their ability to make choices.
Okay, let's get into the first piece of this puzzle, the mystery of staying in pain.
To really wrap our heads around this mystery, we have to step inside the mind of someone experiencing it. Imagine dealing with this crushing internal monologue on repeat. Maybe it's my fault. If I just try harder, things will go back to how they were. You see, this isn't just a passing thought. This is the endless, looping internal dialogue of being psychologically trapped. The manipulator has planted this seed of doubt so deep that the victim takes on the entire burden of blame. They genuinely believe that if they can just figure out the right way to behave, they can unlock that good version of their partner again. It is a constant, totally exhausting state of self-doubt.
Which naturally leads us to ask, how does emotional control actually begin?
Because let's be real, absolutely nobody signs up for a painful relationship. This trap only works because at first it's completely invisible. Clinically speaking, emotional control is a systematic psychological process where one person gradually dismantles another's autonomy, their reality, and their self-worth, all to maintain absolute power. The absolutely crucial words here are systematic and gradual. It's highly calculated. It's basically a slow drip of poison, and the victim doesn't even realize they're drinking it until they are entirely disoriented.
Think about healthy love for a second. It's built on respect, freedom, and mutual growth. Emotional control is the exact opposite. It thrives on possessiveness, isolation, and dependency. But here's the tricky part. In the very beginning, control actually masquerades as intense care. A controlling partner might say something like, "I just want to spend all my time with you." Now that sounds incredibly romantic, right? But actually, scratch that. It's the very first brick in building a wall of isolation. It's a tactic called love bombing, and it's specifically designed to overwhelm you with affection so you're completely blind to the cage being built around you.
All right, let's look at the actual blueprint here. The mechanisms of manipulation and isolation. Once that initial trust is locked in, manipulators usually follow a pretty specific four-step playbook to build this invisible cage. Step 1 is that intense affection, the love bombing we just talked about, which hooks the victim. Step 2 is gradual isolation. The manipulator starts dropping these subtle criticisms about the victim's friends and family, slowly cutting off their outside support network. Then comes Step 3, questioning reality, widely known as gaslighting. The manipulator outright denies that certain events happened, literally shifting the ground beneath the victim's feet. And finally, Step 4, total dependency. By this point, the victim is so isolated and confused that they rely entirely on the manipulator to tell them what is real. The trap is officially locked.
And this whole dynamic runs on an incredibly predictable, endlessly repeating cycle. You know, it's not bad all the time. If it were always terrible, the victim would just leave. Instead, there's a buildup of tension, which leads to an incident of emotional abuse. But then, and this is key, comes the reconciliation and the honeymoon phase. The manipulator apologizes, promises to change, acts super loving again. This exact loop creates what we call a trauma bond in the brain. The victim's nervous system actually gets addicted to the relief of that honeymoon phase, making the thought of leaving feel physically and emotionally impossible.
This brings us to a devastating consequence, the paralysis of the will and the complete loss of confidence. Living in a constant state of high alert like that entirely drains a person's sense of self, and the way they are devalued is brutally methodical. Just look at this progression. In month 1, it's "you're perfect," classic love bombing. But by month 6, it starts shifting to minimizing their feelings. "Oh, you're just being too sensitive." Fast forward to year 1, and reality has been entirely rewritten. "You're crazy. Nobody else would ever love you." It happens so incrementally that the victim doesn't even notice the shift. Their self-esteem is just dismantled piece by piece until they genuinely believe they are fundamentally flawed.
And the heavy artillery making all of this possible? Gaslighting. Gaslighting literally rewrites your memory and destroys your inner compass. When someone constantly tells you that what you saw didn't happen or what you heard wasn't said, you eventually just give up and stop trusting your own brain. And here is the profound tragedy of it all. If you can't trust your own judgment, you cannot formulate the willpower to leave. The paralysis is total. But there is a way out. Let's pivot to breaking that control cycle and reclaiming yourself.
You see, understanding the trap is the exact key to unlocking it. First up, we need to recognize the tangible red flags. If you, or maybe someone you care about, is dealing with a partner's wildly unpredictable mood swings, if you notice an increasing isolation from friends and family, if you're constantly walking on eggshells just to avoid an outburst, or living with chronic guilt and feeling emotionally empty all the time, listen, these are not just signs of a rough patch in a relationship. These are active symptoms of being caught in a psychological trap.
Our single greatest weapon against manipulation is simply naming it. Naming the mechanism is the first step to dismantling the whole thing. Emotional control thrives in darkness, in confusion, and in silence. But the absolute second you can point to a behavior and say, "Hey, that is gaslighting," or "that right there is a trauma bond," the manipulator loses that invisible power over you. You start restoring your inner compass just by having the vocabulary to describe what's happening. Knowledge, in this context, is literal freedom.
So as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to really chew on. Are your relationships empowering your true self, or are they quietly dismantling it? Healthy love should be a foundation that helps you grow. It should never be a cage that forces you to shrink. So take a hard look at the dynamics in your own life, trust that inner compass of yours, and remember, you always have the right to protect your own psychological reality. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep learning.